afternoon. We're pleased to welcome you here for this discussion laboratory this afternoon. We thank Brett Schultz and the whole team to have organized this for us. And we'll be talking about an hour or so, and then there will be a question period. Unfortunately, I think Michelangelo will have to leave us for another performance, but we can go on talking with you without any problem. We are going to talk in English because I think that's the most practical way of going about it, since we all, between us, we must be talking about 5 or 6 languages, so it could be a bit difficult, and except for lucky Michelangelo, we don't speak Spanish, any of us, so voila. So this discussion is actually directly related to a program that Michelangelo and Miccolis created for the first time for the Material Art Fair. As you know, it's called Immaterial. And I would like, before talking to you, telling you what questions we'll be discussing between us and with you, I would like to ask Michelangelo to tell us how he had the idea and what is the idea behind his programming for the Material series.
Hello, thank you all for being here, and thank you for our invited guests for participating in this program, which opens this year for the fourth edition of Material, and we decided to together with Brett to propose a performance and choreography program which would enter in dialogue with the context of the fair, and also attain to the original mission of the fair as a space of artistic investigation. So the proposals that we brought for this edition, and that I selected myself, they very much intervene within the layout of the 2 floors, and they're all quite modest in scale. And for this edition, we decided to defy the notion of a stage. So everything will happen at times unannounced throughout the entirety of the first place. We believe that it's important to try to engage with these performative works and to question the nature of material objecthood when it comes to market economy and the art market itself. I am very, very pleased and very proud to have here with me 3 of the invited artists, and Asencio and Adriano, Wilfert, Jensen, who are here with a performative booth within the fair, and they're hosting us now for the occasion of the talk. And Mårten Spångberg came straight from Brussels to be with us, and the Swedish choreographer who will be participating in multiple roles throughout the day. Let's put it this way. And without further ado, I will pass the word to Chantal, and thank you again for joining me.
So thank you, Michelangelo. So you have everyone's bio on the flyer that is being circulated. There's some on the stool over there. So I won't make a lengthy introduction for every participant. But I would like to say first something about the title that we gave this discussion, which is Firing Protocols, in relation to a concept that is very, I know, near to Michelangelo's interests and preoccupations in organizing his program called Material, and also to all the artists that are here participating in the discussion. So there's a few notions, you know, performance is a huge subject, Even the word is being used in so many different ways and often in contradictory ways. So we won't go into that today, but we'll try to elucidate 4 concepts that come up in the way that the material program was conceived. And so the first concept is protocols. The second is counter-narratives. The third is authority or fractal authorship. And the fourth is the economic model behind this very different kind of work that you've been seeing in the last days of the fair, and that you see now regularly in gallery, museum situations, as well as theaters. So we will start with protocols, and I will ask each participant exactly how they personally define this concept, which is actually a way of working, in my mind anyway, and which is a way of working that has really changed what art is nowadays, and what it means also, and what it can do. So maybe we could start with our 2 gallery people here. You created this entity, Simon and Adriano, but we will talk about the function or the way of working of gallery later on. But first, I think what's at the core of what you're promoting, presenting, doing is this notion of protocol. So how do you see it?
Maybe as a very first stage, maybe the idea of protocol could be about the keeper of the work as well as the activator of the work. And the idea of protocol can be used, I would say, for transmitting the work. And I think it's quite relevant in relation to the program Immaterial, because most of the work have been transmitted via protocol, and then Michelangelo, you have been taking care of activating the works. So there's this can be through language, but it can be also through a set of principles, or the idea of protocol can take many different forms, because I'm also thinking of the work of Mårten, on the choreographic work of Mårten, that works very much through the means of protocol as a way of collaborating with his performers. So maybe that's the first kind of opening. Yeah.
Mårten, I'd like to know, you are often qualified, like it or not, as a choreographer. I'd like to know, are you using this notion of protocol when you work with the people you work with, or do you stick to the notion of the score? Which, for example, for the Fluxus artists, they weren't talking about protocols yet. If you recall, they were talking about scores at the time. So what is it for you?
Well, there's so many things to say about this that we have to bring mattresses and tacos and whatever, because you're not going to be away from here for a couple of days. But to make a long story short, as they say, I think it's great. I was kidding. No. But one thing is to see that protocols has been used for a longer period of time. And I'm thinking, for example, about Ian Wilson, one of my favorite visual artists that has been dealing with protocols of some kind of activity is happening at some point, and that is the piece, and it's written down on the paper. So there is an etymology in visual art that has 20 or 30 or 40 years coming on. But it has definitely been rejuvenated over the last, maybe not even 10 years. And clearly it has in choreography and performance clearly stated score, and in my understanding, score rather deals with a settlement of what can be done, whereas protocol is rather what can possibly be generated. So it's a directional differentiation between score and protocol. However, there is also, with score, there is a happy or not relationship to a particularly Umberto Eco's book, The Open Score, from 63 or 65 or so, where he talks about the score as something where we distribute the authorship. So, particularly in musical composition, that the composer is not the only one that makes decisions, or a distributed decision making. And there I think that there is something else going on with protocol. There's a differentiated situation of what is this decision making doing. There is perhaps, though, a slight complexity with protocol, and it is that it, which is where I am a little bit reluctant to use it overtly around my work, and it is that it has also a connection to neoliberalism, in the sense of the ways that I work in my daily labor is also vis-a-vis a protocol. So there is, I get a protocol, and I am supposed to creatively transmit the protocol and basically make profit. So protocol is a kind of franchise. And one more that is complicated for me is how do we think about, which we will talk about more later, but just to touch upon it, how we think about forms of authorship. Because on the one side, protocol proposes that authorship is distributed. Here's the protocol, and then you dance wonderfully, amazingly, all the way from Amsterdam, dancing, and you are dancing, and you are making your own decisions up as we fly, which in a way then it territorializes me as authority. And now, so I swear myself free from the responsibility of being the man and pass it on to you, which is also a rather neoliberal position. And in that respect, it is up to you now, and it is up to you now, exactly in the sense of individualized forms of responsibility, which is then you have to do it happily, as I have told you, to be this good improvisational laborer. However, we can also see that this has to do with economy, and soon I will stop, but you heard me before, so check out the matrices. But it is also, of course, it has also to do with number one, how do we think about internationalization of work, where something can be passed on to somewhere else, so that this can become possible to do, for example, in Mexico City. Otherwise, if we should bring in a dance company, then the economy will be over before we even think about the catering. So there is also something. And again, there is short, really short anecdote that I think is important to when it comes to protocol. On Cavara, the painter, the date paintings, he was commissioned, or he was a place in Lyon Consortium wanted to have a show with on Cavara. Everything is great, everybody is happy, and one day the whole bunch of date paintings and part of Pontbriand's furniture that the galleries have insisted that they should also have in the gallery. Everything shows up, the assistant calls down, or the technical manager, or whatever, and they say, yeah, start unpacking the furniture. Bring it into the museum, then start unpacking the furniture. Great, the boss goes for lunch. There are three in Consortium, and they're kind of rather leftist people. They go for lunch, have too much wine to drink, but then come back to the museum, goes up in the gallery, and there the assistant, or whoever it was, has unpacked the furniture, and they were a little bit, it's really not a good idea. But so let's put them in the middle. And then they were looking over there, and sort of, that's the paintings. So all the date paintings, it was very many, was still in the bubble plastic leaning against the wall. And the Rick Francis says, the two other bosses, it's really good, no? So in fact, they never unpacked the paintings. They just had them standing there for the whole exhibition. I mean, everybody has seen them anyway, right? So it says that we should have the exhibition. And at some point, the gallery, the museum directors became a bit nervous, like cold feet. And they found a way of getting in touch with Onkavara, which is a very difficult person to get in touch with. They found a way of getting in touch with him. He sent them a postcard back saying, "This is the best ever. This is so, I could never think about showing my work in this way. And this is just perfect. Now you have made my work a new thing. Maybe this is also the way that we can think about protocols, that I'm passing on somebody that has proximities or that are not covering its tracks, so that actually something else can show up, where cultural backgrounds, where environments can show up, and where something can take on different politics than the ones that we have. And in this way, perhaps protocol, away from neoliberalism, can also be a way of saying a work protocol offers a work to gain potentiality rather than possibility, which is a way to learn, to teach us how to live otherwise.
So, yes, I think we'll come back to many subjects you've touched upon. Michelangelo, I think that you have a lot of experience dealing with protocols being handed over to you by people such as Tino Segal, that you work with, W.O.R.K.S and others. What have you learned from this experience?
What Mårten was just saying now made me think of the first time that I think I felt like I grasped this concept, and it was working with Dora Garcia precisely. And it was during the Venice Biennial. Dora was representing Spain, and she occupied the Spanish pavilion and treating the place as a production site of sorts. So for the 6 months of programmation, the pavilion was active and was activated by a showing of repertoire of the artist herself, but then also by inviting 60 selected guests to join the programmation of the exhibition. And Dora at some point left after a month, and she left me in charge of a couple of performance works that I had just started interpreting myself. And because the pavilion was devised in a way that developed around the notion of archive, eventually I started contributing, but in a very almost unconscious kind of way, to the actual production of the archive throughout the exhibition. And I remember one time Dora came to me and she asked me if we could do an extension of photographic documentation that I was doing separately on my own, and to extend it as part of the project. And one day she used this expression. She said, "I love it when the work takes a life of its own. I'm not there, and the work it's surprising me. And it's something that now I feel very close to myself, and I feel very privileged as well to receive protocols from my selected artists for this exhibition of Immaterial. Of the 7 works that are shown, of the 6 proposals that are shown, only 3 of the artists were present, and 3 others, for reasons that I decided to propose also to the fair a program which could be cost effective and also point out the possibility of actually producing a high quality selection with very limited resources. And passing out this invitation to the artists has also been very important, because I have carefully selected works which were firstly commissioned for fairs. So the piece by Dora Garcia that you can see after the talk, Universal Retrospective, was first commissioned for FIAC in Paris in 2010, as well as Callie Spooner's warm-up, which you saw, some of you might have seen in the morning, and it will be shown later and announced throughout the fair. And so there are works that have originally been devised to respond to the context. For example, they decided to respond to my invitation to participate in the program. And so Jeffrey, we are working with a new work of his, which he doesn't get to experience himself. He passes the protocol to us, and what Mårten was saying, what is striking and important is that what could eventually be generated, and it creates a gray area, which is the gray area where there's also potentiality for failure, I think. Potentiality for something to feel really wrong. So yesterday we decided to activate the planned procession with Jeffrey in a different way, and today we might try to responded to the notes that I keep receiving from him according to how I'm reporting to him how the piece is functioning. So I think all of this then will bring us to the question of authorship and something that also Adriano and Simone have a very strong relationship with in representation of the works that we have here in the book.
I suggest that we sort of put together the subjects of counter-narratives, how protocols and performance can offer counter-narratives to society and art today, and that of authorship. Because I realized that maybe we weren't able to go into detail with each subject, but and we've already started to talk about the question of potential and potentiality, for example. So let's start by a very concrete way you were describing Michelangelo, that essentially we realize that working in this way with protocols breaks down the notion of authorship. And so you as performers, but also as sort of representatives of other people's work, and sort of not only being the holders, the beholders of protocols, you also enact them and show other people how to enact them. Can you talk about that experience concretely?
So yeah, we are a gallery and represent immaterial artworks, and we take that literally. So we try to represent works using the means of the works. And since doing this, there is one notion that I came to think about, also in relation to different notions in the program, which is this thing about forms of life, like how which is a kind of blurry term in philosophy, I think, but Frank Leibowitz, I think, a French artist, has been working on it, and quite fascinating how like certain forms of life make certain works of art possible, and certain works of art make certain forms of life possible. And I think in the way that we deal with representation and transmission, this sort of how a work is, I don't know, it gets abstract, but like there's something about the embodiment as a way of representing, but also as a way of circulating the work.
Yeah, I mean, somehow we become like proxies for work, like momentary proxies, and that's where the literal aspect of representation enter into play, because then we are present to mediate on the work within the means of the work. So it might be that it's a very close copy to the work, or it might be just a sample or an introduction to the work that actually use performative means in order to actually transmit this, what we could talk on a very abstract level, forms of life, or like what kind of experience it produces, what kind of principle of relationship it creates. And and just getting back to this idea that Mårten was proposing, that instead of like that, it's about a transmission from the author to the worker that enacts the work, but the idea of like a work that becomes in the middle of something where people start to relate to it, or that it produces certain forms of relations. So that's what we are trying to do somehow.
Mårten, can you now expand on what this question of potentiality or potential or developing potential is for you, and how that can offer counter-narrative to this neoliberal society you describe? You allude.
Yes. In a way, I am allowing myself to talk about myself for 30 seconds or so. I am way more conservative and conventional and classical than those gangsters are. I go to the studio and I bring my dancers there and I make all decisions all the time and there's no collaboration. Full stop. I am in control of everything. And I will
Credit your words with and by.
Yeah, but that's just for show. So, but nevertheless, so apart from what I do, bringing on a slightly different discourse. So, there is something rather, I have never said what I'm going to say before. It's all Adriano's and Simon's fault somehow. Yours also a little bit, Chantal. But so I'm thinking like this. It's not so much about the distribution of authorship in the first level of, and now you make decisions in the protocol. It's my protocol, full stop. But when we pass protocols on, for example, to an art fair, or also within a piece, and here comes a short parenthesis, something that I have experienced quite often is that, let's say there's a new dancer in the dance group who is learning somebody else's dance. Somebody did it, and now we have an understudy, so to say, and then the choreographer comes to say, it's really, really good, Michelangelo, but now you have to make it yours. Very conventional, but this is not a good thing. So I'm thinking, and that's what the end of the parenthesis, I'm thinking like this, if we think about dance and performance, also visual art, as performative in a, say, elementary, yet idea that the subject performs into the world something. Then it's a matter of the subject, which is something that I have consciousness about, I have a representation of myself, my subject is a languaged opportunity. If this is what happens, I'm languaging myself into the world. If this would be sort of a very primitive yet around performativity, I'm interested in saying the protocol can issue a situation where it is rather not making it yours, but rather to think about the protocol as a kind of a companion. So instead of thinking about a dance as your partner, like my boyfriend, it is rather to think about the protocol as a cat, which is somebody who you live together with, but you never get to understand. So think about the protocol as a way of making a proposal sort of alien, so that you cannot reach it, right? And it is first in this alien making that I cannot deal with this protocol in respect of performativity or consciousness about knowledge, but I need to deal with it with some other capacity, which is then perhaps spirituality, intimacy, physicality, love, whatever, right? And in this moment, there is something that can happen, that issue potentiality rather than possibility. And there is again then, finally, this is my last one. And in this moment, what can come out is contingent to the author and to me as the activator of it. So we still can think that the piece is on its own. And in this moment, to actually think about a performance more as an object, but as a very different kind of object, so that it is actually nobody has authored the performance, but the protocol itself has authored what came out. And this I think is interesting in respect of, it is neither neoliberal or not. It is just a proposal for the possibility of another kind of politics, right?
We were talking the other day with Adriano, one of the participating artists, about this idea of unaware collective processes, as if this aliens area exists regardless of us, and we're just sort of getting to it. We're getting access to something that in its own potentiality is already existing.
I mean, it's really short. Just sort of, everybody of course knows this, huh? But there's a difference between what is possible and what is potential. What is possible is that which I can imagine happening. Also what I cannot imagine happening, for example, I cannot imagining Michelangelo walking in from there now because he's sitting there. That's impossible, I can still imagine it. But potentiality is that which I cannot even imagine in imagining. It is that from the perspective of language cannot happen. And so question for art in our contemporary times is perhaps, instead of making work that has a political announcement, can we think about work that makes us think the unthinkable, or makes us imagine the unimaginable, so that imagination in itself goes through a process of what Deleuze over Simondon would say, a process of individuation, which is that it then goes beyond what we can think, and therefore, by necessity, changes what is thinkable. And this is not a change probabilistic in the sense of a development or a betterment, but it's a contingent change. Namely, it is, in a way, what art does in this way is to make things to come to an end. Came to an end. And now we need to reconstruct the world, but from something already have been to an end. So that's just to say that there is a delicate yet very strong differentiation between possibility and potentiality.
It's interesting what you're saying.
I hate myself so much. Shut up.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
No, that was good. That was so needed.
Yeah, we need to say these things. Another philosopher that has written about this idea of potential is Jean-Jacques Pontbriand, who's more younger generation than Deleuze, a bit in the same, working in the same mode, but he wrote a beautiful text about potentiality and dance, and whether we like it or not. I personally can say that I've always been attracted to dance because precisely of that reason, because of the potential that bodily movement combined with the non-verbal opens up in a way. But while you were talking about it, I was thinking of this piece that I experienced the other day with Adriano, a piece by Hannah Erdman, which is precisely called Animal Companion. And I would suggest you experience it because you'll obviously love it, and all of you also. Maybe you could talk about what happens to you as the transmitter or performer of this piece when you're doing it.
So, just to introduce the piece first, is by Hannah Erdman, an American artist, who proposed this work, which is a temporary companionship. She is inspired by interspecies relations, so basically there is like one human companion, or like the receiver of the work, let's say, or the person who was you the other day, and then there is a performer who is the animal companion, but not in the sense of pretending to be an animal, but by taking away spoken language and just accompanying the first person, the human companion, and it's a very weird work because it's such a simple procedure, but it opens up so many weird relations and experiences. As a companion, I don't know. Mostly I experienced sort of like all the process of the person who is the visitor. What's the proper term for this? The visitor of the work, the experiencer of the work.
Spectating the work.
Spectator of the
Words
work.
only you can use the activator, the inactor. We hardly can speak about spectators.
No, not in this case. It's like that's a thing. It's very hard to grasp, and exactly for that, the spectator goes usually through a lot of process of figuring out what they are supposed to do with this situation. That they have someone next to them that is just there to accompany them, but that they don't know, and that there's no sort of direction for how they're supposed to behave in this situation, which is super interesting. And then what happens usually over time is that some kind of weird empathy is built, but still the performer has not really done anything that you can recognize, which is interesting in terms of performance. Like there's no sort of, nothing is performed, it's simply someone accompanying someone. Do you have some interest?
Yeah, I mean it brings up like exactly this, like we cannot talk about spectatorship anymore. It's really more about this. There's a relationship that is being built, there is a situation that is being built, and you cannot neither capture what is happening, nor name it, but it's something that takes shape at that moment, and that's where the work is actually happening, and which is quite an interesting element, because that's the moment that language is completely ceasing to exist, because it's actually not something that can be transmitted through actually explaining what the work is about. So now we are trying to kind of explain that, but actually you should experience the work rather than this.
You still have 2 days that you can experience it.
Yeah, but at the same time, just to make it clear that the work is not happening in a sense of like, when we are here, and yesterday when you got an introduction to the work, which was like 7 minutes of introduction to the work, but when the work is activated, it happened in a specific occasion, which can be in a museum for the visit of an exhibition, or it can be for a walk in the park, or it can be also for 24 hours, but the work is activated in a precise occasion where the artist then is organizing which performer can activate it for how much time and all of this. And here on the booth, what we do is that we just give a 7 minutes sample of the work, so that gives you an idea. But that's all what we're doing.
Yeah, I would just like to quickly comment on this very interesting notion that just now popped up about how can we name spectatorship, which actually, yeah, it's true, I told him spectating, but then actually no, it makes sense that we need to request it. It makes me think of this moment during the Artists Without Works, a guided tour around nothing, the piece by Dora that we show regularly here throughout the day, is that there's this moment when this figure is giving reasons of his refusal to produce, and he says that the source of his refusal is not fear, but the will to create another possibility. The possibility of not being here, not wanting this, not making something. And yet, against all odds, the work is there. So there is this thing, this space that they're commenting on now with the animal companionship. It's about this, against all odds, the work is there, at that moment.
You, Michelangelo, you are a performer, or you
I have a background as a performer. Yeah, I keep performing, and I think I should always keep performing.
But you have a particularity, which is that I was talking about bodily movement. You use language in your work a lot. So how does it make it different, the way you use it, from theater and from, let's say, the expressionistic modes that you can find in theater?
It's somehow very interesting for me to think about this, because that's how I came about to perform, was almost by chance, and I had two very specific mentors right at the beginning before meeting Dora, and actually developing more my role, not strictly as performer or an executor, and so in my case, my training has been always to wear the role according to my specific characteristics. So both with Tina and Romeo Castellucci at the beginning, I was never asked to be something other than myself, but just execute the score at that point. At that point, we're definitely talking more about a score. So when with Dora, I was first, and that would dealt very much with bodily movement. And whereas when with Dora, I was invited to guide a tour which addresses the audience in a quite conventional way with an initial greeting and all of that, I was very resistant to the idea of acting. And maybe the great thing is that my encounter with this text happened for the first time in the version that you're going to see here later in the lobby, in the piece Rehearsal Retrospective, which is a later piece of the Artists Without Works as a guided tour. And in that case, the piece gets performed in a rehearsal mode strategy. So there is an acting coach present which instructs the actor on how to perform the piece. And because I was given that possibility in that specific presentation to be rehearsing live, also in that case, my approach towards the text kept being from a very specific and personal position. And so now the way then we crafted the text, I have to say Dora, last time she saw it was with you in Oslo in November. It had been 5 years since the last time she had seen it when I first did it in Venice. And yes, over 5 years I crafted the work myself, and now the tour can definitely be performed by other people. I'm thinking that Adriano should definitely have the tour in the gallery and learn it themselves, but I definitely embedded it myself to my own characteristic, and it's a very specific way, the way I do it.
But the way you're talking, it's obvious that there is a transferability that is endemic to protocols and to this type of work. But that is still in the realm of, if you're talking about the art market or any economy, in the realm of like immaterial work. So how do you deal with that economically? I think the gallery is certainly attempting to create one of the new possible models, and then maybe Mårten, you've given this thought how you even created a festival as an artwork, from what I understand, and usually festivals are considered rather vehicles of promotion or dissemination rather than artistic expression or formatting. So in order to round up this discussion, because we're almost at that point, could you each give us a glimpse of what you think the future, we can expect in the future, so far as the economy of this new work is concerned?
So our mission is to sell these different immaterial works as they are, or for what they are. So what happens what we have been seeing happening is that the moment that immaterial works needs an economy within visual art, it's very tempting to think it like selling a painting. So how to sell a performance like a painting, which starts to become thinking it either like an object that you acquire like a painting and that you own and collect it, or like a certificate, which is also kind of, you can replace that, so then you know you bought something. And or documentation, of course, is also possible. But we were very our mission and our interest is to try to sell the work. So how can we sell a mood? How can we sell a dance? How can we sell a conflict? And basically, to do that, we need to use different economical models, and it's like many different for the different works we work with. So like whether it's a loan agreement, it's a tailoring, it's a commission of sorts, it's a partnership. So that's pretty much our mission as a gallery.
Like the first question is the question of dissemination and circulation, and so this can take many different shapes. Of course, there's like the idea of transaction of the work. So the work is moving in space to be shown and to be displayed to like a wide range of viewers, but like it's also how the work can be heard about, like the idea of like also word of mouth or rumor, how the work circulates also, I don't know, through the internet, through textual material, to being written about. So this is also what Galerie is also dealing with, which is the questions of what are nowadays modes of circulations of the work. So how the work expands through its own means, through different stages or different ways. And I think there's also something that we are trying to figure out, which is how to, exactly what you were saying, Adriano, is like how to bring instead of, I mean, it's important to think the work as a form, so that indeed it's a form that can actually travel, be transmitted, and occupy or accompany different people. But it's also how to change from the idea of like the acquiring of a work. It's not about the possession, but it's actually the entering in connection with the process of a work. So the activation of a work implements also that the work has a life on its own and is happening. So for us, it's also about like how we shift slowly the paradigm of like how to make the work being activated and being taken in consideration in relation to process. So it's it's more, it is a development in the work. It's not like a thing that is unchangeable, or the work has its own life. But it's also like, if it would be a pity to say that it's neither nor, because let's be honest also that like artworks have their own life and they leave, and then a painting might actually have like a longer life duration than a performance work if it's embedded in a body. But every matter is actually embedded in a process in its own. So it makes me think of we were reading about a couple of collectors. They live in the south of France, and it's very interesting the way that they approached the idea of like making a work possible. So basically they acquired the work while the artist was keeping the right over the work, and the work was actually a performance made by a mime, which is like and so the work was actually within the body of the mime. So actually the work will exist as long as the life of the mime is still alive somehow. So like there were three of them sharing the work, like in the sense of like the work was made possible through these three people. And this idea of like slightly changing this idea of what does it mean to own or to activate or to make possible a work. I mean, that's like a big part of the economy.
And also, that's one more anecdote, was this a beautiful meeting with a collector in Paris, another French too, who at the end of the meeting, he said, and that was of course not an artwork we brought to him there, but just a meeting, but he basically claimed that meeting as part of his collection as simply having been experienced.
Mårten? Thought out this question in some respects, I'm sure.
Oops, but now I don't really know what I should answer to. So can you slightly recall where art markets?
We're talking about the economic model needed to process this work, make it exist in a viable mode, because it does involve people, it involves work, it involves time, it involves places. So what are would there be any ideal situation for you? We have the museum situation, we have the gallery situation, we have the art fairs, we have books, the internet.
Theaters.
How can we deal with these different situations and make more space or open potential for this work to be done?
Indeed. So, in 1993, a rather important book was published called Unmarked. And in the 7th chapter of that book, there is a sentence, and the book was written by Peggy Felden, who is a scholar at Stanford for the moment, and she writes there, performance becomes itself in and through its appearance, and therefore, ontologically speaking, it poses a problem for any economy based on reproduction. In other words, it means performance becomes a problem for capitalism because there's nothing I can put in my bank vault. This is in 1993. In 1996, there was a thematic issue of a magazine called Forbes, where on the cover it was saying, perform or else. And in this moment there was a proposal that what contemporary economy is doing is actually not a matter of the manufacturing of a number of items in a factory, for example, but it is rather what you are evaluated as a worker is your performance. In 2003, Paolo Virgo publishes a book called the Grammar of the Multitude, where he talks about immaterial labor, where he says that all of us basically, high and low, has entered a state of immaterial labor, which means that what we have become is performance artists. I don't sell a product, but I sell the show. For example, if I work in a call center answering questions about what do I do? My kid has spilled ketchup on the sweater. Do like this, do like this. And then what I get paid for is my show. I don't sell a product, right? And then, a little bit later, which is, so what we can see with these three examples is that what has happened is that from being a problem for capitalism, the last 25 years, or let's say actually from 1970, so especially August 1970, what has happened is that performance have become a super prominent product. It is what we said. Also, the last example is in the coming insurrection by the Invisible Committee. They write in the third chapter of that little book that you can also download on the internet, as well as you can with the Grammar of the Multitude. Very good. In that book, on the third chapter, they start by saying, obviously, you know that your most important property is not your villa, your sports car, your Ferrari, not your Prada shoes, but what is your most important property is your subject, is yourself. That's what you sell. Cynical or not. But with this said, right, that performance have very strongly been consumed or subsumed by capitalism. So there is certainly no, to deal with performance today is definitely nothing subversive or like, oh wow, yeah, awesome, cool, you were so against commodity. I mean, obviously, my stuff, however weak it is being circulated, not too much, but, I mean, an increase would be nice the next few years because I'm looking forward to going to retirement. So if you circulate the work a little bit more, that would be quite nice, right? So my work is presented in catalogs, in museums, in fairs, etc. And that is already forms of commodification. So what we need to do today is to see it is not if or not performance, if or not choreography, if or not interventionist, but it is rather what are modes of rethinking where towards what can these forms of immateriality bring us. And I think with this in mind, there is a very interesting shift happening over the last 5 years or so, kind of away from a post-structuralist paradigm accompanied by identity politics, performance studies, etc., towards an understanding of thinking that performativity is maybe not the only way of approaching the world, but there is also a new one, or ways of rethinking what an object can be. And in this respect, a performance is also, it could also be understood as an object. If we think about, a memory is an object, however it is soft, it's this memory. A performance or a moment is also an object. And if we think about these situations as objects, immateriality, this is way too fast, but nevertheless, immaterial proposals can also, in that respect, propose opportunities for potentiality. However, there is also things that so to say, there is also, within Galerie, there is something extremely important that, for example, didn't at all happen with Tino Segal. Tino Segal's proposal is a very simplistic critique of market economy. But what that critique is doing is that it is a critique reactive to capitalist art world economies. So it actually confirms art economies even more than it did before. And now, voila, and now you can also have a spoken contract and make money from it. top dollar, no problem. It was super important in the early 2000s. But what we need to think about today, perhaps, because I have to remember what I was saying. Yes, we need to issue new kinds of economy instead of complaining, instead of having a problem. So if my work is presented in a theater, outdoors, in public space, a fair, or in somebody's flat, actually doesn't matter. Because all of it is in capitalism, and capitalism is omnipresent. And it certainly doesn't work, which I'm maybe actually doing right now, it doesn't work to sort of go to Basel and the art fair there and say, oh, there's a problem, the art world is such a commercial situation and capitalism rules okay. Of course it doesn't. We live in a capitalist society. What did you expect? It's a business. So, but exactly there is where Galerie is a proposal in the sense that it is in capitalism, it is in the art world, but it issues different types of economy. Which, for example, the way that MoMA is acquiring performance is not in a separate entity in the acquisition or in the collection, but dance and performance is in the Department of Archive. So I said, the moment when they will approach me, I will say, go back, forget about it. I'm not going to be in the fucking archive department. I'm only 49 years old, I'm still in the contemporary. So I will not sell anything to MoMA until they have a department for dance acquisitions. But this exactly is when those guys are way beyond what even MoMA could think about thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I'd like now to open the discussion to you people, and I'm sure some of you have maybe comments or reflections or even questions that you like. This would be the moment to pitch in whenever you'd like to. Please. Anything that you've been thinking about, just tell us.
So is it just maybe would like to be a little bit more...
Hi, this has been fascinating. Rebecca Mendes, I'm just But anyway, I would like to understand a little bit more clearly when you're saying that it is an immaterial acquisition or an immaterial space of these performances. How is it that through Galerie, so maybe I need that, right? Just how is it that it exists? Because it seems that I am not as clear of there's always, you mentioned, there is the distribution, there is the web, there is the photograph, there is all these things, but a little bit more of how this transference of relationship would be enacted. What is right now your most dangerous idea of that? Of how is it that, where would you take, if you've gone to a certain level of immateriality, what is right now thinking of possibility rather than potentiality? What is the possible? I can still have a sense of this. What is your potential right now?
Well, I think all the works are still very, they are much more relevant than Galerie. It's the works are all in different ways challenging their conventions, and challenging what we understand as art. But the transaction depends on the work. So for instance, internal conflict, the work by Curator, an Estonian artist, it's a conflict that's being activated within a certain group that works together. So it's an edition of 5. You can buy a conflict and see what basically work with individuals of the group to find out what are the inherent conflicts and to stimulate them and to make an internal conflict in that group. That's one economical format, edition of 5. You pay something, you don't know the edition is, they have different prices, but you don't know what is the difference between the 5. And the galleries have to be determined. So we try also there to, in as many levels as possible, to embody the means of the work. so fed up with the conflict, determine the CL later so that we also can stimulate further conflicts between us and the artist.
There's also this thing of when I was mentioning dissemination through different means, it's exactly what also why we are here for. It's because also to talk about the artists, to share their practice, to share their work, and to make it known to a bigger amount of people, because we know that the selling is one aspect of the work, but the sustainability of the work, it's also its circulation through many other means that people know about the work. So like we try to open up this idea of that it's not only about a transaction of a work, like a work to be sold, it's also a work to be circulated, to be known. So actually that is what creates sustainability for the work. And you can look at the list, because basically every work is being precisely described through the formats in which it is available. So we are collaborating with all the artists to really find out what would be the best to make this work as an object, in a sense of like as an immaterial object, but that actually it is a consistent element that can actually enter in a transaction mode. But then each work is very different. Like the case of internal conflict, or like a dance solo that it's a yearly edition, and there's like 30 solos between 2003 and 2033, and each year is available as to be activated, whether by a theater, a museum, an art fair, or in a private setting.
Which is a fantastic, groundbreaking solo by Mårten Spångberg called Powered by Emotion, and it is then, so now we're in 17, so we have, how many years do we have left? 16? Something like this.
15, 16
Yeah.
years left.
So you have to hurry up.
But I think what Galerie is doing, that is the most provocative part of it, which is a kind of benevolent provocation. So it's not about going against the art world or against art markets. But if you think about it in this way, short anecdote. I was visiting Hamburger Bahnhof in Berlin, and I was curious about why is the walls in the museum spaces or in the exhibition spaces not this thin, but they are super thick. Strange. And so, and now this is a little bit bragging, but I asked my friend who works there, why is the wall so, how come? And she told me that, but you know, the museum, the exhibition spaces, they have climatized. So the walls are that wide because we are storing pieces in the walls. So when I look at the Richter, there is an Emil Hirst in the wall, and then the Baselitz, and then the Kippelberger, and then on the other side there's a Leger or whatever. And I thought, this is when museum business are going fully fucking bananas. But, so, and at the same time, Hamburger Bahnhof nowadays only allows for, when you give away, what is it called, when you, donations, that is work on paper. They don't say yes to anybody, even if you have a bunch of Picasso sculptures, forget about it. So, what they are doing is also, if you think about it in this way, the museum as we know it, Tate Modern, or Pompidou, or Prado, or whatever, they are all installed with the knowledge of a certain kind of economy, which is a cumulative capitalism. Sort of, I have 2 cars, or I have 4 cars. Better. I am cooler than you with my 4 cars. And supermodel girlfriend, or whatever. But in any case, so here we have the same situation with collecting. I'm collecting in a cumulative way, pretty much in respect of 4-disc production. What they are doing is also to say, if we have a new kind of model of production in society, which is an immaterial form of post-4-disc economy, we also need to think about new modes of collecting vis-a-vis post-4-disc economies. And this is not a cumulative, but it is a circulatory capitalism, which is a matter of, which in Chimchovich, in flipping pieces, is becoming dark. But what about if it is a matter of work circulating, work being passed on? Sort of, I own the work, or I have contributed to the economy of this work, but it actually enriches you when you have it, and you when you have it. And even if I don't have it, I'm also kind of, I can be around the work. So this is a way where their work is in a way collapsing what collecting has been about. So if W.O.R.K.S was the 1970s problem for collecting, in the sense of what is it that we put in the museum collection when we collect W.O.R.K.S lines on the wall, right? And those guys, they are the W.O.R.K.S of the 22nd century. Not the 21st, but 22nd, so beyond their times.
So would any of you like to acquire any of the works that are being proposed by Galerie? Have any of you even...
We are here until Sunday. So.
This is the chance of your life, I would say. I think unless you have any other comments or questions? No? Anyway, all these people will be around all day. We can continue our conversation later on, if you like.
I would.
I have a practical question to acquiring the work. Is it possible to acquire the work from you as just a protocol and I would perform it myself? Or is the work bound to you as a performer?
I am represented by Galerie with two pieces. One dance performance that I did a long time ago, and then recently they asked me if I could do a multiple. And I thought about it for a very, very long time, and it was a very, very difficult task for me. But I thought, and I thought, and I thought, and I had dinner with Nikima, and it came closer. And then, aha! And so I proposed a piece that is called "What Should We Do With All the Emotions?" What should we do with all the emotions? And that's the protocol. What we should do with all the emotions is to breathe them out the nose. So the piece goes like this. And now you can all do it. What should we do with all the emotions? Now, I mean, this is what is for free. So now you all have it. Yeah. So now you can just go home. If you meet your mother for dinner or whatever, it's like, what should I do with all my emotions? If somebody comes around and I've lost my job, what should I do with all my emotions? And you just tell them, just breathe them out to your nose, no problem.
Which is maybe more you claiming, or is the word that I can think of now, or branding maybe, an act that I would do anyway when I would meet my mom. So I'm like, oh, Mårten, go out of my head.
I mean, maybe you already are practicing it, but it might be that not everyone is practicing this breathing exercise,
which is the unaware collective collaborations we were talking about.
But I can also say it in this way: when I do Feldenkrais in the morning, which is a kind of soft gymnastics or whatever, when I then feel better during the day, do I blame Feldenkrais, or do I say that's okay?
Well, you're represented.
Something is always coming from somewhere, right?
You're represented by a Galerie, so maybe there that's maybe the question for the acquiring part, because well, I guess Feldenkrais is also, it's also quite present in the.
Well, how did you devise the pricing for what are you gonna do with all the emotions? So the work is being transmitted, so now you have to work
continually.
So it's pro bono. This one is really for free. I mean, like now it has been presented and circulated. But
maybe the price is that you know that it's by Mårten Spångberg.
There's definitely the value.
I think, we could talk about the question of knowledge and acquiring knowledge. And you can ask the question also, does knowledge belong to someone? is anyone really an author of any sort of knowledge, any word, or any protocol? I think maybe we have to think of knowledge and some people are thinking a lot about those questions. For example, people that created Creative Commons on the internet. In the economy of the material world, which is more and more immaterial, as Mårten is talking about, there are also new forms of circulation that are manifesting themselves. For example, I think it's BMW now that is introducing the notion that instead of buying a car, you buy time to share a car. That doesn't really belong to you, but the time belongs to you. So there's all kinds of new ways of thinking about this question of ownership or authorship or spectatorship that are really more and more there in our midst and in our way of behaving and our way of being. And that's why, personally, I think it's so important to think about what being alive and being live and sharing liveness is about. Because it goes beyond these questions of ownership or authorship. Because in the real, these concepts don't really exist in the end. And but history has made us believe in these concepts, and they still, in a way, dominate the world. But it seems that all of that is loosening up. That can be very dangerous also. So I think the main thing that these processes that we're introducing, the protocols are developing, is what I call beyond the expanded dance or expanded cinema or whatever you may call it, an expanded consciousness. And this is really the political dimension of this work that is the most important, I think. Mårten, you wanted me to express myself. Voilà. So I think our time is pretty much up. I wish to thank all of you for being here, for sharing this event all together. And the day goes on now, and you can now have all kinds of new experiences that the Galerie will propose. And
I just need to announce a time change for one of the performances, because we're running a bit late, and one performer is missing. Because I'm also producing the program, I have to make sure that everybody's here. So, there will be unannounced works by Spångberg and Adriano throughout the fair in the afternoon. A piece by Dora Garcia, rehearsal retrospective, will be in the lobby at 4, and the Artist Without Works will be shown upstairs at 5. Also, Jeffrey Farmer's piece will be unannounced and present throughout the evening. And for the people here, I would like to invite you to stick around if you want after opening hours. In this floor, Mårten will do a private view of a solo of his digital technology, which we decided to present. Galerie and Stanley offered their space to present the work. So you're welcome to stick around, but it will not be announced. You're welcome to come in.
You have to be attentive and conscious. Wow. Thanks again.
It's great.